So before we came to San Francisco to start Wired, we were living in Amsterdam, and we were publishing a magazine called Electric Word. And Electric Word was originally conceived of by a translation company that did translations and also software tools for translators. And their idea was, hey, start a magazine, that'll help us sell our business, sell our products. And we thought, well, that's probably not as efficient as putting a couple salespeople on the road, but yeah, we'd be happy to talk about the various technologies being developed for the different ways that people worked with words. And so there were writers, translators, publishers, anybody involved with the tools for those tasks. And so we had to figure out how to build a community among people who didn't necessarily recognize that they were of a same mind. And so we decided to call them word workers. And we had our little marketing campaign, which was Word Workers of the World Unite, because everything was going digital and all the data types were going digital, and suddenly we'd start to think about things in a similar way. And so we called them proudly forth to join the digital revolution. So this was the late 80s, and we were living in Holland, and Philips was a super innovative company at the time, and they were cranking out CD players and compact disc, laser discs, interactive video. So we broadened the scope of the magazine to include desktop publishing, optical character recognition, speech synthesis, machines translation, and then that started to lead us into neural networks and neurolinguistic programming and the like. And then, of course, there was sort of the bread and butter of the huge advances happening in word processing and printing, archiving, retrieval, that sort of thing. So it was a small operation with a tiny circulation, but we came to the Bay Area at one point. We met Kevin Kelly, who at the time was at the Whole Earth Catalog, and he called it the least boring computer magazine in the world. So that was our claim to fame. And of course, we ourselves were adopting the tools and trying to figure out how we could do what we were doing more efficiently, and more importantly, having more capabilities than we already had. So we were using like Ready, Set, Go and PageMaker. In fact, we were the first magazine in Holland, or Europe, that was produced using desktop publishing. But so we were very excited about all of this, and excited about the developments, about the new markets, about the editorial opportunities that meant for our magazine. But a couple of things happened that sort of caused a pivotal moment in my life, and also in our thinking about what we were doing. And the first was a meeting of the Special Interest Group on Computer-Human Interface at the Association of Computing Machinery's annual meeting. And this took place in Groningen, which is up in North Holland, in probably 1988 or 89. And a lot of what they talked about was super esoteric, and I was sort of letting it wash over me. But this was the first time I saw the performance artist Stellark. And there are no words to describe this man. I don't know how many of you are familiar with his work, but this is what it says on the website. He's visually probed and acoustically amplified his body. He's made 3 films of the inside of his body, completed 25 body suspension performances with hooks in the skin. He's used medical instruments, prosthetics, robotics, VR systems, the internet, and biotechnology to explore, and this is what I love, alternate, intimate, and involuntary interfaces with the body. And I thought, oh, this is kind of blowing my world open, if this is part of what we're dealing with. And then this is his work more recently. He has grown the ear using his own cells. He's attached it to his arm. He's setting it up so that the ear can both hear and transmit. There's an embedded microphone in there, and so he calls it an internet organ for the body. He's now a distinguished research fellow and director of Alternate Anatomies Lab, I love that, Alternate Anatomies, at the School of Design and Art in Curtin University in Perth. And so that for me was a rather extreme introduction to art about technology. And for that matter, it was a rather extreme manifestation of man-machine interfaces as well. But it definitely opened my mind to the possibilities that our magazine would be covering things more than just business-to-business technology and research. And then we started to think about the effect that digital and biological developments would have on art, and the way artists would push and probe and challenge the technologies of our times. So since then, I have sought out opportunities to explore that dynamic, and I've been on juries for the Interactive Arts Festival, for Interactive Media Festival, for Ars Electronica. I was an early board member and ardent supporter of 01. And I also helped create and sponsor a digital media art and exhibition program at UC Berkeley, which was called DMAX, under Rick Reinhardt. So the other major cultural influence was William Gibson and Neuromancer. And so that was the sort of launch of cyberspace, the consensual hallucination, and the whole cyberpunk genre. And so suddenly, not only these ideas and designs and concepts were smart and logical and plausible, but the characters were amazingly crafted, and the vibe was just completely badass. So it was as if the nerdy world, suddenly got really cool soundtrack and like street fashion and so forth. So that's when I basically realized that my world was going to change.
Explosion.
And it blew my mind. This goes on. Okay, it really, really, really changed. Okay, really changed. Okay. By the way, you may not know this, but literally just this week, I saw the news that the Neuromancer film project is back on track after years and years of attempts. Yes. There's a UK team called GFM Films, and they're partnering with a Chinese company called C2M Media Group. I don't know who any of these people are. And they're going to co-develop and co-finance Neuromancer. There's a producer named Lucas Foster who produced the film Mr. and Mrs. Smith. And no word yet on a director or screenwriters or anything like that. But it's going to be completely amazing to have that film brought to life. I mean, it could have been in 1985, the year after the book was released, or it could have been, 2000, but it's going to be, 2015 or 2020. So it's like that book will have had 3 completely different manifestations in film, which I'm looking forward to seeing. So we started to get this vision for, very exciting developments that would improve our capabilities, our efficiencies, that would enable things that had never happened before, that would create new markets, that would open up new opportunities, and we were incredibly optimistic about it. And we thought, come on everybody, let's make this happen. But the world that we were really encountering was really dominated by dystopian views. And the world in the late 80s, early 90s was really, people of vision, people who thought about the future, were enormously impacted by a lot of negative brands, negative ideas. And I'm reminded of something that Stuart Brand said. He said, when a new technology rolls over you, you're either part of the steamroller or you're part of the road. And so I think that was splitting people in half. And our little group of readers were writers. Some of them were resisting word processors, and some of them hadn't even used typewriters. And there were musicians and record producers who were talking about that cold sound, and photographers who didn't understand why they would do what they did if they couldn't get in the dark room with chemicals. And so technology was a hostile force and a negative influence, and maybe it was painful, unnecessary, a waste of money, something we'd be better off without. Or it would chain us to our desks, and it would replace face-to-face interactions. It would destroy our creativity. It would eliminate ambiguity and nuance. It would reduce us to, and everything else, to zeros and ones, dehumanize us all. And in fact, Edward Abbey has this great line. It's just pour some well-sugared office coffee into its evil little silicon brain. But the turn of the prior century, the visions of technology were relatively helpful and benign. And they would enable us to perform activities like we'd never done before. So for instance, it could improve the chicken yard productivity and efficiency. It could help us foresee molecular gastronomy. Your tailor had a whole new way of functioning. This is your architect. This is how you would build your home. And in fact, this is interesting now because, of course, you do have these panel and prefab ways of constructing homes. And of course, all of this was the year 2000, because the future was always the year 2000. So ironically, it's now the past. But the early video conferencing had been envisioned, and of course, this is come on in and take a memo. Here's my personal favorite: is solving the energy crisis by heating our homes with radium. That was a great idea, and this is how we got our great ideas. This was how our educational system was envisioned in the year 2000. So, to which people like Frank Lloyd Wright said, if this keeps up, man will atrophy all his limbs, nothing but the push-button finger will work. But Jules Verne was the one who really got it, and we have him to thank not only for pioneering the whole genre of science fiction, which is based in physical reality and rooted in science and, fanciful but plausible and even desirable technologies. But the amazing thing about Jules Verne is that in his book, From Earth to the Moon, he was able not only to imagine flying to the moon, he imagined that it would be like a capsule, which is roughly the size of the capsules we send to the moon. He thought it would be shot out of a cannon, which turns out doesn't work very well, but a rocket-propelled launch isn't that different. He produced the math to explain how it would all work. He said it would take about 3 days. He even imagined that the Americans would do it first, that it would launch from southern Florida, and that it would culminate in a capsule that splashed down in the ocean. So that was pretty extraordinary. So again, all of this was, coming to fruition and fueling all these positive visions, but at that time of our history, we were completely dominated both culturally and I think in terms of the news by these negative visions. And the authors now, whether it's Bruce Sterling, William Gibson, Neil Stephenson, they're really good at imagining what can go wrong. And so that's what they were focused on. And in fact, when we got to California, we realized that the whole thing fueling this massive investment in computers and digital technology was the FUD factor: fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And that it was this incredible anxiety around the technology and about making the wrong choice. We can't invest now because it's going to be so much better in 6 months. But if we go ahead and buy now, it may just turn out to be a brochure. It may not actually exist. But if I wait too much longer, I'm going to miss the next thing that comes out. And so whatever it was, it's just buy IBM and you'll be safe. Don't take any risks. Your boss won't fire you if you buy IBM, because we all trusted them back in those days. And in fact, now if you were to buy the trusted purveyor, then you might be missing out on something that literally in 3 months will obsolete that. But computer magazines were really capitalizing on this fear. And they are contributing, along with all the writers, to a very negative and fearful climate. But, think back to the time. We were also confronted for one of the first times with real ecological disaster. I think the beginning of our really profound understanding of climate change was starting then. We were worried about energy depletion and losing what it took to fuel our booming economy. And we were at war in the Gulf, again, for the first time. And basically the world was going to hell. And so, the Bay Area has always been a very optimistic, forward-thinking, we can do it, get it done kind of place. But, it was at that point, of course, and throughout its history, it's been full of free spirits and libertarians and counterculture people. And, they're not terribly interested in law and order. But along came technologies that enabled communications that could not be so easily wiretapped anymore. And suddenly you have the crime and law enforcement community talking about crime and terrorism, and how we needed to really worry about how the proliferation of these technologies was going to impact crime and terrorism going forward. So I had the honor of serving on the board of the Electronic Frontier Foundation at the time when the Clipper chip was being introduced. And we had a big run-up in the sales of computers and the use of computers in business and then also for personal use. And now suddenly comes along this idea that, oh, wait a minute, this is now something that needs a back door for the NSA to use for spying and to track our communications. And the emergency access to these digital devices became a huge campaign. And this was during the Clinton and Gore administration, who you would have thought would have had a more enlightened view of this from the Bay Area libertarians' point of view. So we had to battle that out for a few years, and we eventually defeated the Clipper chip, but then of course 9/11 and then more recently the Snowden disclosures have brought this whole idea of encryption back. And this time the Bay Area's response, led by Apple and Google, was we're just going to go ahead and encrypt everything before you have a chance to create backdoors. And whoops, sorry, the technology's out of the barn now, can't stop it and put it back in the bottle. But the massive recording of telephone conversations, the integration of your tax and your health insurance records, your entire digital footprint, everything you look at on the web, everything you purchase, all of your social media engagement, suddenly all that information is out there, and it does not sit well with folks like us in the Bay Area, who've always prided ourselves on our individuality, our quirkiness, and maybe some unusual sexual proclivities or imbibing of certain things that other people in other parts of the country might not understand. So so there's a number of artists who were working on the dark side, if you will, of the digital revolution, and one of them is Trevor Paglen. And Trevor went to Cal. He got an undergraduate degree and also a PhD at Cal, and his work has been on geography. And so his work is focused on privacy, anonymity, surveillance, and the black world of classified defense activity. And so he believes, obviously, that secrecy just fosters the worst excesses of power, and has used his artwork to expose things like NSA listening posts, or secret prisons that the CIA was running in Kabul, or he actually went to an Israeli nuclear reactor and took photos of that. So he also tracked spy satellites. But his more recent work is there's something called the Autonomy Cube, and it's a sculpture that incorporates several internet-connected computers with an open Wi-Fi connection, a hotspot that the museum or any of its visitors can use. And the sculpture routes all of the Wi-Fi traffic over the Tor network, which is a global network that it's maintained by thousands of volunteers, and they're running servers, relays, and services to anonymize the data. So the cube, the sculpture, is also its own Tor relay, which means that the sculpture, the host institution, and any visitors to the museum where it's installed would all basically become part of this privacy-oriented, volunteer-run internet infrastructure. So the Bay Area has a special responsibility in the debate over surveillance and privacy. For one thing, with Facebook and Google capturing all this information about our likes and dislikes and so forth, we need to be aware of it. We need to have an artistic response and a cultural sort of immune system response to that, which we do. But on top of that, we have a thriving and rapidly growing biotech community. And more people, more and more organizations are sequencing your biological data, combining that with advances in machine data analytics, fueled by venture capital and private equity. Everybody's looking for the next Alzheimer's cure, the key to the right chemotherapy treatment, or unlocking the secrets of the microbiome. So there's an artist named Heather Dewey Hagborg who takes us into the biological surveillance realm with this project, which is called Stranger Visions. So she's been collecting DNA samples, random DNA samples off the street, chewing gum, cigarette butts, napkins, hair, and then sequencing them to predict what the faces of these people would look like based on their DNA. And that's a terrifying thought in and of itself, that this is now in the hands of people who knows what they will do with it or what they can do with it. But the really amazing thing is she creates these sculptures, and then you can actually see the previous one was the found DNA. This is one that she made of herself, and it's a self-portrait based on the 23andMe data that she got back after sequencing her genome. So I thought it was pretty funny that you can see her earwax is trending wet, her malarial resistance is none, and her freckling is more than average. But what's cool about this project too is another thing that I think we hold near and dear, which is she's released all this code on GitHub and the public version of it, as well as all the tutorials, so that anyone can participate, add to it, improve it. And she's also working with Mark Schur at Penn State, who's doing all this research on projecting what faces would look like based on DNA. More recently, she started a site called bioanonymous.me, which is a hub for the exchange of all this information. And she's also created the official Bionymous guide to erasing your DNA, extracting your DNA, and replacing your DNA, using things like bleach or saline solution, centrifuges, chelax, which is a chelating material, and preservatives. So, biological surveillance is the extraction of DNA and microbes from your skin, hair, nails, body fluids. It's tracking, monitoring, and analysis of faces, fingerprints, and irises. It's body heat, it's your pulse, it's your perspiration, and of course, Stellark's thing of involuntary movements. So the first step towards creating biological privacy, of course, is generating potential solutions through art, through science, through technology, policy, and also theory. So, this is the classic role of the artist when confronted with technology, is to maybe pause for a minute for reflection, question some of the new technologies that are hurtling towards rapid dissemination, and in general provide a forum for the discussion of the impacts and implications of technological and social change. And obviously this discourse will frequently take the form of skepticism. But the ultimate dystopian view of the future, of course, is the technological singularity. And that's the theoretical point at which machine intelligence surpasses human intelligence. So apparently the first time this was used was, the phrase was coined by Werner Wenge, the science fiction author, and this ran in the January 1983 issue of Omni magazine. And he was writing about why the universe seems so empty of other intelligence. Physical catastrophe could account for this, but nothing makes the future of a species so unknowable as technical progress itself. Of course, there had been prior intelligences that had been wiped out or colonized by another superior one, and that's why there were no other stars and no other people out there. So futurists are forever plotting technological performance, and the trend curves are always, climbing straight up. And Wenge says there will not be a leveling off because of the accelerating rate of intelligence. And it isn't important whether it's silicon-based or DNA-based. It won't have any effect on the ultimate results. He said, the evolution of human intelligence took millions of years, but will devise an equivalent advance in a fraction of the time. So then he goes on to describe the singularity. He says, the singularity, I believe, already haunts a number of science fiction writers. So we know it's haunting people like Elon Musk and Bill Joy and Stephen Hawking. And there are a lot of people who see very positive impacts for the technology, who see a lot of empowerment, a lot of community building, a lot of opportunities for humans in our technological advance. And interestingly enough, a New York Times journalist, John Markoff, is bringing some of these ideas out in a book coming out this summer called Machines of Loving Grace. And basically he's tracing the root of this schism between will robots take over and subjugate us, or can we use computers and networks and everything we're learning to enhance our beings. Back to the two labs that were running at Stanford in the 50s, one by John McCarthy, which was the Artificial Intelligence Lab, the other by Doug Engelbart, which was the Augmented Intelligence, or Intelligence Amplification Lab. And the difference is very stark, and it kind of explains the bifurcation. Sales work, Stanford Artificial Intelligence Labs, was focused on the machine at the center of it all. And Doug Engelbart, as you probably know, amazing character, basically included, he saw the computers as enhancing humans, and he believed that they could make the world a better place, and that it was his job to make that so. He demonstrated many of the prevailing concepts of modern day computing, including the mouse, hypertext, network computers, graphic user interfaces, and he saw all of these things as enabling. And of course, Engelbart's law is the observation that the intrinsic rate of human performance is exponential, and that the ability to improve on improvements is a uniquely human trait. So John's book is called All Watched Over by Machines of Loving Grace, and it comes from a poem written by Richard Brautigan, another Bay Area luminary. He was one of the Beat poets, and I didn't know this, but he was actually a poet in residence at the Cal Institute of Tech for 1 year. And he actually, this is the final stanza of his poem, which is really lovely, but I like to think of a cybernetic ecology. We're free from labors, joined back to nature, returned to our mammal brothers and sisters, and all watched over by machines of loving grace. So whether you think these machines are benevolent, or whether they're a superior intelligence, or whether they're just downright evil, these are things that another Bay Area artist, Mark Pauline, makes you think about when you witness a Survival Research Labs performance.
The fire department's a little upset with us, and we don't want to get into any more trouble than we already are.
I think there is an audience to war, especially war of the 20th century, and the audience is the civilian population. There's sort of a morbid fascination with the effects of warfare. My approach to being an artist in society is that the things that you do should have a really big impact, and it's not a question whether it has necessarily a good impact or a bad impact. It's just art should be imposing itself on as many people as possible. For me, it's not really worth it unless
it's imposing itself on her head.
You can't ever be embracing anything from the status quo without at least questioning it, which is what any artist worth his salt spends all his life doing. And I think Mark knows this.
I think that it's important that there are professional people working to inject a sense of anarchy into our day-to-day lives. I think it's more important than it used to be.
Willie, I got a feeling you got your training during Vietnam.
I never went there, but I think I thought about it a lot.
When I was in high school, that was when all that Weather Underground, crazy stuff was going on. I mean, Bill Ayers was like my hero, along with all those other crazy people. I wanted to grow up and be like that. I wanted to be one of those people like burning down the banks and all that stuff. I wanted to grow up and fight the power. And I ended up growing up and doing this instead.
The art world does not like combining humor with art. If you introduce a lot of humor into your art, powers that be of the art world are going to, at the very least, get worried.
This is what Halloween revelers in San Francisco's Mission District were treated to last night. Police who rushed to the scene did not seem amused.
It boils down to just common sense. You don't light a 20-foot flame in the middle of a major celebration like Halloween. It just doesn't make any sense.
It's some interesting footage. That was meant to be a joke, but those guys didn't think it was funny. I always like to pretend like there's a reason for it, but really I do it because I think it's funny. My ultimate fantasy about what people should take away from these shows is that when someone who's been to a show is on their deathbed, the images from an SRL show are some of the last things that are crossing the path of their mind before they expire. If you can get into people's minds so that you're one of the last things they think of before they die, then you've really done it. So that's always been my goal. But I can't prove that that's happened.
Yeah. So, they came to Amsterdam actually before we moved back to San Francisco, and they had their production set up way out in this totally abandoned, deserted, decrepit, squatted Docklands area, which is actually now rather trendy now, but back then it was just scary and dangerous. It was cold and dark, and the show didn't start till like 11 o'clock at night, and you go to an SRL show and you can't tell whether they've programmed the machines to behave the way they're behaving, or whether there's a glitch, and you don't know whether the machine's going to like lunge at you, and if it does, whether it would be accidental or deliberate. And so this is the thing that he just keeps doing. I mean, the shows taunt the local authorities. You know, they flaunt the regulations, and they champion anarchy and mechanical might, and of course loud noises and explosions. But the interesting thing about SRL is, you know, this is sort of a unique to the Bay Area art form that has now existed for over 35 years, and yet not one of their machines has been purchased by a collector or a museum. And you know, I don't know how many countless artists and filmmakers and performance artists, and of course other machine artists Mark and SRL have influenced, but getting back to this theme of, you know, what can we do to provoke a higher reverence for artistic community and support the collecting of these sort of alternative art forms. I just hope that someday soon SF MoMA or New York MoMA or a major collector is going to put a bid on one of these machines and basically solidify SRL's place in our artistic evolution. Thank you. It could be one of you. So the other thing about working with technology, of course, is the boundaries, pushing the boundaries, and also overcoming artistic constraints. I mean, one of the most difficult things as a designer is having no constraints, because it kind of makes it hard to know where to begin. And so if you say, well, here's my budget, or I only want it to look and feel like this, or what have you, it introduces a constraint. And technology offers us a huge number of those constraints. So John Lasseter of Pixar said that art challenges the technology, but technology inspires the art. So, of course, he was talking about the amazing relationship between Pixar and ILM, between the storytellers and the animators and the amazing storytelling genius they have at Pixar, coupled with the extraordinary technical proficiency that the tools developers have. And at its best, you know, technology advances through mixing media, allowing human interaction, and making something either possible or easier than it was before, which is what, of course, Pixar and ILM have done. But it's not always such a successful interaction. And sometimes new technology is released into the world and it spews a whole mess of badness for a really long time. So desktop publishing generated a whole lot of bad documents. Electronic music has generated a whole lot of bad music too. In the right hands, of course, these are powerful tools and fabulous artistic media, but we can't always depend on that. And this brings me to another Bay Area phenomenon, which is Tumblr and Instagram and the emergence of a whole new internet aesthetic. So it's supposed to look like shit, or the internet ugly aesthetic. This is an article that was published by Nick Douglas, who's the editor of Valleywag, and it's completely hysterical. It's fully footnoted. It's a scholarly paper about the rise of the sloppy and the amateurish. He details the various techniques that contribute to this outcome. Freehand mouse drawings, scan drawings, poor grammar and spelling, human-machine glitches, rough photo manipulation. He also likens it to troll punk, which is defined as a movement focused on the drama that occurs when you fuck shit up on the internet. So, but it's more than just troll punk. It's a whole new aesthetic that has taken over, and it stands in contrast to everything that is polished and refined and high resolution and professional. So there's also Chartroot, which was created by a guy named Sam Biddle, and it's a term he coined for basically infographics out of control. So in an article called How Microsoft Paint Graphics of Conspiracy Took Over the Web, he details all of the different ways we can circle and create boxes and arrows, and look, the same person is there, and there they are all wearing ties. In the next slide you can see, this was a reaction to the Boston bomber, marathon bomber hunt for the killers. And so all these photos, you know, diffused all over the internet. You know, all these people are watching in one direction. Look at this guy, he's looking the opposite direction. Check out his bag. And here is the remnant of the explosive. So This is called Chartroot. And then, of course, there is shitpic. This is by Brian Feldman. And shitpics are what happen when you upload, screen cap, filter, crop, and re-upload. So it's an interesting Instagram phenomenon. And here's some other examples, including just bad resolution, bad cropping, everything about it. And, I'm not just being snobbish about, professional design and long format journalism, but you have to admire the plucky attitude that some artists display while working within the admittedly suffocating confines of a new format. Which brings me to emojis, and I saw the emojis on the marquee out there, which is fabulous. That's hysterical. But I'm also seeing it
Hey,
show up
Bill
in-
Nye here in the Emoji Science Lab. This episode, holograms.
So this is GE
Now,
has
holograms
sponsored
are
Emoji
photographs
Science,
that look
and they seem to
three-dimensional.
think that the
It's
use of
amazing.
emojis
We're able to
will
do
help
this
Bill
with
Nye
coherent
transfer
light.
information
Coherent
from
light
his
is what
brain
comes from
to
lasers.
yours.
Coherent
And
light
I've
has
looked at this
all
3
its
times. I
waves
still don't understand
in
holograms,
perfect
nor do I understand
synchronization.
why there's little
So
piles
you
of
have
stinking
one
shit up
beam
there.
go, at the object,
It's
and another
it's
beam
kind
come
of
at the
an
object
extraordinary
from a different
thing. I mean,
direction. Those
it's a joke,
waves
right?
of
But
light
do they really think this is
constructively
going to
and
help?
destructively interfere when you photograph.
And then, of course, we have our own Cara Rose DeFabio's fabulous emoji recap of season 3 from Game of Thrones. She's actually hard at work now on a very serious project around surveillance and privacy, but she went totally viral with this. And actually, there is some really great emoji art. There's an artist named Yoon Jake, and he's done these wonderful portraits of celebrities. And who knew that something dead simple and just tiny and low res and deeply constrained could provoke such a global phenomenon and command so much creative attention? So apparently we revel in our creative constraints. We find some comfort in our ability to accomplish so much with so little. So anyway, the Bay Area has plenty of artists working with code and circuit boards and robotics and networks and digital media who've succeeded in creating complex and exquisitely beautiful works while grappling with the constraints or the limitations and demands of the new media. Now, no survey of Bay Area artists working with technology, commenting on identity, surveillance. I think this is my Apple Watch calling me. I have never had that happen before, but I'm just going to say no. Hello? Milk, honey, okay, got it. Without a reference to the woman that I really consider to be the grande dame of this art form, and that's Lynn Hershman Leeson. Lynn's been at the forefront of media and networked art for over 40 years. She's a photographer, a filmmaker, performance artist, and activist, and she's also a pioneer for having created some of the first artworks for interactive video disc, first artworks using a touchscreen interface, using networked robotics, embedding still images inside of live digital video. Her work often deals with feminist themes and features powerful, smart, and often very seductive women. Some of them are invented, like Dina, who is a networked AI agent, and some are real, like Ada, who was Lord Byron's daughter, who was a brilliant mathematician, credited with having built the first computer program. Lynn envisioned things like online sex rooms, DNA hacking, reality TV, and identity theft. Just an incredible pioneer and a true reflection of the issues and technological capabilities that we grapple with here in the Bay Area. So if Lynn is the grande dame, I think Michael Neymar could be the granddaddy. Or, I don't know, maybe I think of him sometimes as the court jester, but he's done lots and lots of really groundbreaking work that you saw in his previous presentation, and things that have filtered out of his lab and his artistic research into mainstream products. And more, the IP issues around that are really interesting. But it also, it begs the question of what are we doing, or what is the artistic community doing to sort of display the provenance of a lot of these ideas? And are we drawing the linkages? And are we let's say, linking to the sites? You know, are we establishing the sort of the ideas that influence the others? I think it's a really interesting research project and something that was beyond the scope of what I could do for this, but I think it's really interesting. Sorry, I forgot to show you a few other of Lynn's images. This is Digital Venus, which is lovely. But the next Bay Area woman that I wanted to talk about is Camille Boote, and I know she was here, is here, and didn't want to steal thunder, but I guess she won't be showing her work, so I thought, yeah, then I can. I mean, I think Camille is the perfect embodiment of that blend of, you know, technology and painterly and artistic sensibilities. And she comes to it as a painter, but I gather she's a badass coder on top of that. And she works with interactivity and invites the viewer to participate. And when you do, there's a lot of interactive artworks that you can never quite see what your impact is. But in her work, you get that very tangible connection. And you know, our worlds are so disembodied and cerebral and virtual, and her work invites you to move or fling your arm or slither across the floor in a process that regrounds us in our bodies. And I find her work deeply satisfying and exhilarating and visually really beautiful. And I also think that her work is a gateway for people who are interested in this kind of art to discover. And from here, could go on perhaps to more challenging artwork that you would have to have a little bit more of a technological understanding of. But this is a beautiful piece, which is the simulation of a river at sunset. And it takes you through all of these. And then another Bay Area artist, Jim Campbell, whose work is just exquisite and oh so collectible, although for the 20 years I've known of his work, I think the prices have doubled or tripled since then. But you know, Jim's a geek. He's an electronics guy who basically builds his own circuit boards and uses LED lights and so forth. But the interesting thing is, rather than using the tools of the digital age to make everything more precise and more crisp and clear, he's actually detracting from the image. He's taking away pixels, he's taking away information, and he's sort of opening things up to interpretation and to ambiguity. And so he designs and builds everything. He uses these lights that shine through a resin panel or frosted plexiglass, or he can project low-res video onto a series of LED grids that are hanging on the wall. So some of these are very abstract, and some of them are more emotional in the series Home Movies. But you know, again, here's an artist who's internationally acclaimed, very collectible, and the gallery here in San Francisco that represents him has been run out of their space, and is yet another example of gallerists that can no longer afford the rent that they had at South Market, Todd Hausfeld. So the artists and innovators of the Bay Area have been the source of key ideas and technology and computing and the effect on our lives. And there are a number of just computing trends, technology trends that can derive some of their history from things happening in the art world. So the sharing economy, for instance, we talk about that, most people think Uber or Airbnb or TaskRabbit or Snapgoods or Dog Vacay. I'm sure that was the first one that popped to your mind. But you know, the sharing economy is as old as Burning Man, which was, as far as I know, the largest, you know, collective, impactful, communal art experience in the Bay Area. You know, open source is sort of the original idea of computer code as an art form, as a collaborative art form. Citizen science and biohacking and all of that kind of open biology, all of that's taken from the world of hacking and free software. And then, of course, community engagement. There's hacktivism, sort of in general. There's Art Hack Day in particular, which I know Gray Arts has supported. It's an internet-based nonprofit dedicated to hackers whose medium is art and artists whose medium is technology. But it just brings together improvisation and grassroots organization, entrepreneurship, and all of with an overriding purpose. And then there's performances at the end of a 48-hour period. But our biggest example of community engagement is not currently dominating our landscape after 2 years of twinkling over the bay, but it'll be back next year. And I'm referring, of course, to the Bay Lights, which is the biggest public arts project ever undertaken. This is a technical diagram that basically outlines the electrical grids and the boxes that they installed. While it's running, I will just tell you a little bit more about it. So the artist, of course, is Leo Villarreal, Yale Art School grad who went into the Media Lab at MIT and worked with Michael Neymark, who Michael showed one of the pieces that Leo worked on. Leo was inspired to work with light after building a wayfinding sculpture at Burning Man. And now he's made an incredible career for himself by using LEDs in beautiful light sculptures. The executive producer of this project is Amy Critchett, who happened to be the initial office manager at Wired magazine. She's also married to Mark Pauline, SRL. And so this technological wonder is made up of 25,000 individually programmable LEDs, 100,000 feet of wire carrying both power and data, 700 power and data boxes, 50,000 bridge clips designed specifically for the Bay Lights, and it runs on 2 Mac Minis running proprietary software in the W4 substation, which is the big concrete island holding up the center of the west span. Leo's sequences never repeat. It costs $4.25 an hour to power the energy-efficient LEDs. So that's about $51 a night, and that's under $20,000 to power for an entire year. So in terms of engagement, these are estimates, but 50 million people have seen it with their own eyes. That's over 1 billion media impressions, which is enormous. There's a live stream every night and an archive of each of those nights of the entire first year. But 2,000 people bought a gift of light, a light in the Gift of Light campaign, and that raised $250,000 for them via social crowdfunding in the Gift of Light. They've raised $12.5 million, $8.5 for the first install. They had a 2-year run and then removal, and then another $4 million for the reinstall. But they brought in over 30 businesses in their business activation network, and they brought another 30 organizations into a cultural alliance. Also, they've made a film about the making of this project called Impossible Light, which is now up for an Emmy. It was the filmmaker Jeremy Amber's first film, and now, of course, he's working on a film for SRL. But this is a great example of using technology-fueled art as a way to galvanize a lot of different organizations and people around something. And I think it generated a lot of revenue for the city. I think it gave a lot of people a lot of hope that we could pull off a kind of massive arts project in the future. So that's a good thing. We could be deriving so much more benefit from the tremendous wealth creation that's taken place in Silicon Valley. And the funding opportunities and corporate support are still really hard to find. They're very sparse. But there continues to be this just enormous wealth creation. There's over 108 unicorns now. Unicorn being a company whose valuation is over $1 billion, which has just been established by their fundraising. And this past 6 months alone, there were 88 unicorn companies in January. Now in May, there's 108. So the ongoing bull market, a new generation of disruptive technology, and we've just got this engine going. So obviously this has created the land grab. You couple that with massive expansion like behemoths like Salesforce and Google and Twitter and Facebook, all of whom want to be in the city. Why? Because that's where the artists are. That's where the creative culture is. That's where everybody wants to be. And what you have is a massively appreciating real estate market that's driving up prices for everyone. So I'm sure talked about this before, but the people who are supporting this art are struggling to stay in the city, whether it's Catherine Kark's gallery and Todd Hosfeld's gallery, whether it's the artists. People are operating from their homes, dissipating that community sense. And I just, hats off to Deborah and Andy for the Minnesota Street Project. That's just a huge thing, and the CAST project as well. But it's going to take a concerted effort on the part of the city's philanthropists, museums, and collectors to preserve and enhance the role of the artist in the community, where graphic designers can go off and get stock options in unicorn companies, or they can try and make a living as an artist. And it's just a really difficult dichotomy. By the way, you know what a grouping of unicorns is called, right? A blessing. You got to wonder if this is a blessing for San Francisco. So I've just detailed a rich interplay between the technology developers and the artists who inspire and provoke and deploy those technologies. But we can't allow the art world to be overrun by corporate mindsets. Having said that, I think there's a lot to be learned from the corporate game. And so drawing the lines between artistic creation and technological innovation is important. But what are you doing to strengthen our community? And what are you doing to trace the origins of the ideas and to make everybody feel like we're all playing in the same sandbox, and to help the corporations, the institutions of the Bay Area art world understand the value that this kind of art has for us. So there's a trend, and that is that of venture capital firms hiring designers to be design partners. I think this is really interesting because John Maeda, for instance, who was at the Media Lab, then he was the head of RISD, is now a design partner at Kleiner Perkins. Jeff Feen, who I had the good fortune to work with at Wired, is now a design partner at True Ventures, who've invested in companies like 3D Robotics and Little Bits and About Me. So the reason this is happening, and the perspective that John brings to venture capital, he talked about last year at TED, and he said, design is the reason we want to buy things. And more recently, he said, amidst all the attention given to the sciences as to how they can lead to the cure of all diseases and daily problems of mankind, I believe that the biggest breakthrough will be the realization that the arts, which are conventionally considered useless, will be recognized as the whole reason why we ever try to live longer or live more prosperously. The arts are the science of enjoying life. So, with that in mind, I bring you the last clip of the day, which is the celebration of the art nerd culture, which, of course, Disney does so well. Oh, wait. You need audio.
Can we fix it?
Can we go back? Wait. Shoot. Aw, that was a really impactful moment, don't you think? I did, but if I do it too many times, well, this is all just prelude to my conclusion. Can we get it? Oh.
Mutually assured destruction.
Environmental entropy. Dystopia, not perfect. Yes, Miss Newton.
Can we fix it? Even the teeniest of actions.
How'd you do?
Could change the future.
Right? So, anyway, a celebration of all things nerd, a celebration of positive visions of the future, and the hope that everything we're doing here makes it better for artists, better for the technologies we use, and better for our community. So, whatever we do, it's all just a prelude to the next thing anyway. So.